In the Valley of Decision, the danger of compromise and lukewarmness in the last days. Read by the author, Acacia Slaton.
Chapter 5. The Green-Eyed Monster of Envy. I recently watched a YouTube video with a powerful message that goes very well with the theme of this chapter. A 10-year-old boy is poorly dressed with ripped pants that are too short with holes at the knee and his toes sticking out of his sneakers. By all appearances, he's poor and helpless to do anything about his situation. He's sitting on the bench in a state of shame, anger, and self-pity as his peers walk by and make a mockery of him. Finally, mustering up the strength to stand, he walks over to a bench, his head hung low, and sits down by a well-dressed young boy about his age. The well-dressed young boy waves and smiles, but our ragged boy doesn't wave back. He looks at this young boy who seemingly has everything he doesn't and gives him a cold stare filled with hurt and envy before walking off and sitting alone under a tree. Closing his eyes, he softly mouths the words, "I wish I was like him." Then with determination, he says, even louder 3 times, "I want to be like him." To his surprise and delight, he finds he is no longer sitting under the tree, but is now sitting on the bench in the place of a young boy. He is delighted to see he has on new sneakers and is nicely dressed. "Yes!" he shouts enthusiastically, but his happiness is short-lived when an older woman approaches him with a wheelchair for him. He's well-dressed, but now he's paraplegic. When he looks around, he sees a well-dressed young boy whom he replaced, leaping, running and shouting with joy, unaware of being poorly dressed, but overjoyed with the miracle of being able to walk for the first time in his life. The ragged poor boy had envied the well-dressed boy sitting on the bench, but unbeknownst to him, the rich kid had envied him as well for entirely different reasons. We each have a unique DNA and fingerprint. Out of the billions of people in the world, no one is quite like you. We were not meant to be carbon copies. Even identical twins, although similar, have different fingerprints. There's nothing more boring and predictable than trying to fit in and be like everyone else. I believe that's why there's so much unhappiness in our world. So many of us are so afraid to think outside the box and be our true selves. Joyce Myers once said, when we desire to be someone else, in essence, we're indirectly saying to God, I don't care about the plan you have for my life because I want to be just like him or her. Until we learn to accept God's love for us and realize how much we matter to him, we unknowingly tie his hands. He can't move as he liked on our behalf. The young boy in the video didn't like his situation in life and thought his life would be much easier if only he could walk in someone else's shoes. But his envy got him into bigger troubles. In my own life, I haven't always liked the shoes I've had to walk in. I hit a roadblock when writing my memoir, The Serpent Beguiled Eve. The editor I had hired was moved by my personal story, but had concerns of a possible lawsuit if the book went ahead. I was stumped and wondered if I should continue on. Around this time, I spoke with a former coworker of mine. For the first time, I told her about my bouts with mental illness and that my spouse, we were in the process of a divorce at the time, had come out of the closet and said he was gay and no longer wanted to be married. You have some difficult shoes to walk in, my friend said, but you must finish what you've started. Your book is going to help a lot of people get set free. She also shared that her son was gay and that she loved him just the same, but was still believing God for his healing and restoration. After speaking with her, I later realized I could continue with the book as long as I changed the names. Most importantly, the book was not defaming my ex-husband's character. He was openly gay and even had publicly announced on social media he was engaged to a man. So my book wasn't falsifying information about him with the intent to harm or slander his reputation. It was my own personal journey of coming to terms with and accepting the new normal in my life with the hope of helping those with similar experiences to come into wholeness through Christ. Prior to coming into acceptance of this new normal, I had dealt with shame and self-hate, feeling like such a failure when I saw married couples together. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe everyone has a happy marriage. There are good marriages, but none are perfect. Yet I reasoned like this: at least her husband is with her and hasn't left her for a man. As long as I coveted the ideal marriage, I remained in bitterness and self-pity. I had to realize that the same God who parted the Red Sea could move on my behalf. First, however, I need to let go of my past. Most importantly, I couldn't allow this trauma to make me stagnate. I had to keep moving forward in faith, trusting that God had my best interest at heart and He would redeem the time. I had a friend who began to experience Mara or bitterness in her life. She was in her late 30s and strongly desired marriage, but she was being pursued by all of the wrong guys. God used me to encourage her to not compromise by settling, and most importantly, to trust God. Eventually, however, our friendship came to an end as she allowed the green-eyed monster of envy to steal her joy and faith in God. She couldn't rejoice with others and instead got into the habit of slandering those who were in relationships. In her eyes, either the couple idolized each other or one or the other wasn't attractive. I advised her to stay off social media or deactivate her accounts, as every time she scrolled through and saw pictures of couples, she was allowing this monster of envy to corrupt her to the core. She listened to my counsel, but shortly thereafter began communicating with me less. I empathize with her, as I've been just as guilty. However, I made a decision to rejoice with others and realize God has a blessing for me as well. I know I have to be patient to see it through. Please allow me to share a personal reflection I wrote when I was dealing with envy and making comparisons within my own life. I hope it will help you to kick off the green-eyed monster of envy and to trust God with your life. Most in the faith are doubting Thomases, and this generation, very few have the faith of the patriarchs of old. Thomas doubted the resurrection of Jesus and only believed after speaking with Jesus and physically touching the nail scars on his hand. Some may agree, while others may insist they're not doubters. Yet, why are so many of us living as wilderness Christians? failing to see the promises of God fulfilled in our lifetime. Most of us die in the wilderness, never receiving healing and spiritual wholeness, and not reaching our God-given potential and calling. We leave this earth pondering whether we had really heard from God concerning our calling, and deep inside feel a sense of loss or disappointment over unfulfilled promises. This root of bitterness, if not dealt with, can spring up and defile many. I strongly believe that gossipers are broken and rejected souls who are restless and discontented with the outcome of their own lives. Thereby, any news about the downfall of others brings a sense of joy to their otherwise famished and dire spiritual condition. I have this conviction because I was a gossiper. I murmured and complained. I compared myself to others and questioned God's faithfulness in my own life. I was quick to inwardly and sometimes outwardly point out the flaws of others in order to minimize the tragedy of my own life. I began to inwardly say to God, "You are only faithful to some, but not all." I had singled out in particular family, friends, acquaintances who were successful in their career, my pastor and renowned evangelist. I often walked past the fridge in the kitchen and read the magnet, which had been there for over 10 years. It displayed Joyce Meyer's quote, "Putting God first is the key to experiencing His best." I would walk away deeply convicted, knowing deep inside that God was not top priority, and I had not truly surrendered all and made Him the Lord of my life. Have you truly made Him Lord of your life, or are other things dividing your attention? Don't believe the lie that God loves you less than others. Remember, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. His attack is more emotional than it is physical. He desires to erode your self-confidence so much so that you don't love yourself and you doubt others have an interest in you. You then find it extremely difficult to believe in God's love for you. But your circumstances do not dictate God's love for you. He loves you regardless. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Singleness, divorce, unemployment, childbearerness, death of a loved one, sickness. Does it mean He no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with death? As the scriptures say, for your sake, we are killed every day. We are being slaughtered like sheep. No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. Romans 8:35-37.